Hey everyone, now that we're into day 2, a bunch of people have Sunblast, and I've been fielding a variety of questions that have all boiled down to overthrowing traps. So I want to do a quick video explaining what that means, because if you haven't played a trapper much, you might not be aware of what it is, when to use it, and how to avoid too much of it. So first off, every trapper has a trap throwing limit. This gates the number of traps that can be active at any time, and only sources of it are on the tree. So what I mean by that is you can add 5 additional traps as part of the trap throwing mastery. You can add 2 as part of this saboteur node, and then another 2 as part of the master saber. Now ignore this tree. This is what it imported when I went into standard, and it's a little scuffed. But those are the only 3 places where you can modify the number of traps that you can have active at any given time. And when we throw traps, you'll see up here in the upper left that there are a number of traps out. Now I have a Sunblast on, so you'll see that number goes up by 3 instead of 1. Now normally a high-end trapper would want a huge amount of trap throwing speed so that you can get at or near that max traps limit, because that's where your DPS comes from, or a lot of it comes from, is having more traps out. A Sunblast triples our damage by allowing us to throw 3 traps at a time, so it becomes trivial to get close to your max traps limit. And you can use rolls on gear that right now I have benchcraft increased trap throwing speed on both of these scepters. Like if you have too much trap throwing speed, like from your scepters or from amulets or other things and nodes on the tree like expeditious munitions or other places, or a bunch of places that you can get trap throwing speed, it's going to be really easy for you to hit that trap throwing limit. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I actually really like having a very slight amount of overthrow, and the reason for that is your maximum DPS window is going to be when you have 24 traps out, and you don't want to just stand still and throw traps, because it's not very effective at keeping yourself alive. So normally when I'm playing, I will throw traps and move around, throw traps and move around, throw a couple of times and move around, and it becomes easy. I don't have a ton of trap throwing speed on this particular build, but you can see when I move around, I have, I don't know, maybe 12-ish traps out at a time. So you do want some amount of overthrow, meaning when you stand still and just hold down the button, you're going to have slightly more than 24 traps out. And the more comfortable that is, the easier it is to keep a very high DPS uptime. A bunch of people have the questions I've fielded, just in case this is something that might be happening to you but might not be obvious, because your skitterbots will trigger the traps, and so it might look like they're going off, but maybe some of them aren't because you're overthrowing. Yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to touch on, because a bunch of people have been somewhat confused about why the traps might not be going off. The first traps that are laid on the ground get disabled once you start going over the trap throwing limit, and the new ones take priority. So if you're overthrowing, it becomes harder. Real quick, I'll show you how to take a look at that in your PoB. So first off, I guess the most important thing if you're using a Sunblast is the roll on reduced trap duration. So a 55% reduced trap duration, and I'm doing this in standard because I have several Sunblasts, but a low roll, meaning this is a 55% roll, is going to increase the amount of time that the trap is on the ground. The trap is on the ground here for 1.8 seconds. You can see in the middle of the card for explosives trap, it's on the ground for 1.8 seconds. Now if I put on a max rolled one, it's only on the ground for 1 second. Now this has a lot to impact the feel of how it plays. Like there's less of a delay, it just feels better. But it also increases the window in which that trap is alive. So the trap is alive for the entire duration sitting on the ground, and then when it goes off, it's active for another full second. So for the entire time the trap is on the ground, plus the amount of time it's going off, that's the lifetime of your trap. So with a min rolled one, it's going to be closer to 3 seconds, and with a max rolled one, it's going to be closer to 2 seconds, and half of that time will be doing damage. So you can imagine having a bad roll Sunblast will make it much easier to overthrow your traps and put you in a situation where you're not doing much or a lot of damage because you're putting too many traps out in the window of the trap itself. For that reason, I would recommend, if you can, get a higher roll of trap throwing or reduced trap duration on your Sunblast. Anything maybe 65% or higher, something in that neighborhood. If you're curious about the math and how to figure out how easy or hard it will be to overthrow, the best thing to do is to go take a look at your POB, and you'll see this is the League Start Early Maps one, and I have a trap throwing time of 0.29 seconds. Now that's quite fast, and that means that every 0.29 seconds there will be 3 traps coming out of my trapper. And if we look at a poorly rolled Sunblast, let's say it's the min rolled, it's going to be alive for 3 seconds. And so you take 3 seconds and divide it by the number of traps that you're throwing at this trap throwing rate, and you get something like 10 casts in that 3-second window. Now, if you look at a max rolled Sunblast, it's something like 6.5 casts. So you're gonna just do some quick napkin math. I don't think there's a way to do this in PoE, or there might be, I'm just not aware of it. And sort of work out what your exact trap overthrow will be. And again, I recommend a slight amount of trap overthrow, but just know that it's a thing and it will affect your DPS. And as long as you're aware of it, it's really easy to manage. But if you're not aware, sometimes you'll get into situations where it will feel weird, or why am I not doing a lot of damage? And this might be the reason why. Okay, second thought, now that we're into the new league, and I'll try to keep this one shorter since I just talked for 6 minutes about trap throwing duration. The new masteries in the elemental wheel for inflicting exposure are actually really strong, and I'm going to switch mine from 3% chance to hits to deal 300% up to this exposure you inflict applies at least 18%. Now, the reason for that is once you get spell suppression and you get into maps, probably like white or yellow maps, you're going to be spell suppression capped, and all of these exposures are going to be 18% instead of, I think the default might be 10. So this is worth doing. I have switched into this, and it feels more smooth. The DPS feels a lot more smooth than a random 3% chance and a 1% chance for cold, which is what we really want, which would inflict a max brittle whenever it hits. All right, next thought. A bunch of people have asked me what weapon passives I thought were interesting, and I think the answers are these trap throwing speed ones, because the reduced trap trigger area of effect is completely nullified by the Sunblast, so it's only positives. Now, I know I just got done talking about how overthrowing traps is bad, but you do want some trap throwing speed, and if you can get it on your weapon and free up the other places where you would want trap throwing speed, so like if you were able to reallocate passive notables away from trap throwing speed and into something else, that's pretty sick. And then maybe you don't need a trap throwing speed suffix, and you could do something like a bench crafted crit multi-roll, which is 5% extra DPS. Like, there are a bunch of things this sort of opens up, and I think it's really sweet, especially with the Sunblast on, because that reduced trap trigger area effect is a non-issue. The other is if we look at marks, I think I might switch into a mark instead of LE weakness. A number of people have suggested it, and thank you all. One of the coolest things about this has been, taking a build that I spent a lot of time on last league, and then hearing all the feedback from each one of you, and tinkering with it and trying to integrate it in interesting ways. And a bunch of stuff has come out of that. But one of them is, I think Mark the Prey it looks super strong. It's a lot of extra damage. And if you can get some amount of increased effective marks, it's probably worth it. At 100% mana increase cost, I think I did a little bit of eyeballing. It looks like it probably is not going to be a big deal for us because we're stacking so much mana cost reductions anyway, that my guess is that this will probably be fine. At least the early tiers of it, 15 or 20%. But we'll see. It's still early, and I haven't seen any of these. I haven't even seen any of them on trade. Maybe they'll start popping up. All right, I think that's it. Thanks so much for all the feedback I've been getting. I really appreciate it. If you have any other ideas or interesting interactions that you found, let me know. I'm really excited to try new things out. I wish I had more time to play this weekend because this is sort of the, exploration phase of the new league. But I'm getting in a little bits of time as I can. And I hope you're having a great time, and I'll talk to you next time.